May I first of all thank you for coming together today to reflect on in this exercise of learning together. But beyond that, I want to thank you for all that you do in your parishes, wherever you are. It's not an easy time to minister. We all have been learning to minister differently. And that is great because we are disciples. The disciples are learners. So by our very calling, we are learners. So we are learning, and that is part of our calling. And so we continue our learning, and learning together like this is part of that. But what happens is that in a lockdown, we learn things differently. Mm-hmm. And we learn different things we wouldn't learn otherwise. It was Dietrich Bonhoeffer who suggested that every Christian should pause or stop to ask questions. Every Christian should stop or pause, as if we embrace a theology of disruption. And that theology of holy disruption has stayed with me for the last 20 or 25 years, ever since I read Bonhoeffer. It is very easy to learn things in normal times, but our learning in a crisis situation, our learning in a very specific critical situation is different. So God sometimes gives us those opportunities. And if you don't find those opportunities, you have to create opportunities. That's what actually Dietrich Bonhoeffer would say. So we are given an opportunity. Who gave it? Let's forget about it. I don't want to go into the discussions about theodicy here, but we are given an occasion of interruption. All our neatly planned life is just disrupted. And in such disruption, Bonhoeffer would say, we would see and hear the things we wouldn't otherwise hear and see. And I'm sure that that has been our experience. We've been hearing things that we wouldn't otherwise hear. And we were seeing things that we wouldn't normally see in a normal, if there is a normal situation. The first thing was that we lost our buildings. The buildings we actually love, the church buildings where we gather together. It was a very difficult situation for us as to work. I don't want to go into the debate about it, but I have seen two extremes, two extreme views, and people oscillating between the two. One was that church buildings don't mean anything. They're idols. So let us get rid of these idols and let us go back to home. That's where we all started. That is rubbish argument. I don't agree with that. Church buildings has been central to our witness ever since we started building churches. And we can't compare ourselves with the first century Christians because they didn't have a church to go to. And they didn't have a home for the congregation to meet together. They met in actually different houses, which actually led to problems also we know. So that was one kind of argument, no? Churches are all idols. Let us not worry about idols. Let us go back to our kitchens, as if kitchens cannot be idols. Our kitchens and our homes can also be idols.
Oh, yes.
So there is no benefit in moving one idol out and getting another idol in. Any of these can be idols. A home can be idol. So that's not again the point. The second extreme was that the church is everything. Because we lost the church, we can't do any ministry. And I've heard actually many clergy saying that. So I would actually say without theologizing a lot, we just needed to grab the occasion for engagement with people. Church buildings have got a place. They are sacred places. I don't think they are idols. They can become idols like everything else in your life. Anything can become an idol. But at the same time, the mission of the church is not just centered around the church. If you want to know what is a sacred place, just look at yourself. Basically, we are the holy places. We are the sacred places. A building becomes sacred because of its association with God, who is sacred, and we who are sacred. We are holy, God is holy. And it is in association with God and God's people, the places also become sacred or holy. So if God is everywhere, and if God is the sacred one, maybe this lockdown has helped us to regain that sacramentality of life, sacramentality of human life, and maybe sacramentality of God's creation. There has been quite a lot of emphasis on environmental concerns these days. My sister-in-law, who lives in Delhi, New Delhi, called me the other day, and she said, actually, our sky can be seen now. We could never see the sky before. It is clearer. So I just leave that for you to reflect on. God and sacred spaces. It is God who makes everything sacred. So even our kitchen can be sacred. Our life can be sacred. Our context is sacred, wherever actually we are. And we need to have that confidence. God is with us wherever we are. Because ultimately it is God who is sacred and holy, and he made us also holy and sacred. And we are the sacred spaces in this world. So in this lockdown, I'm hoping that we learned something about God, about church, and about our mission. And those three are important. In spite of all the circumstances we see around us, we still can believe and hold on to God because God is in control. And God uses agency like us, the agency of the church, agency of the humanity, of believers. God's work still carries on. So have we found a God who is in control, a God who sometimes works in very different ways, a God who actually comes to us in very unexpected ways. There are very small ways of God touching people that you can see all around you, everywhere. Examples in your own community, in your own congregation. Maybe just a small telephone conversation, or just seeing someone actually 2 meter distance or 2 meter distance. There is a lot happening. God is with us, and let us hold on to him. Maybe this has also helped us to ask certain questions about the church. What is church? Church is gathered. We believe that we are called to be together. But how do we remain a gathered church while we are dispersed? A gathered church, but still dispersed. None of us would have ever imagined keeping a distance from people is the best way to care for them. I always thought we need to be closer to the people we care for. But we have come to a stage where keeping that distance becomes important in caring for one another. What does that mean for the church? What binds us together if it is not physical space brought together? And what kind of church are we supposed to be? Around us, is a broken world, a hurting world, a grieving world. The church sometimes speaks, or normally, in a very colonized, in a very politically empowered church, we normally speak from the position of strength. Maybe we got it wrong. We need to actually speak from the position of weakness. The church is called to be a vulnerable people, following a vulnerable Jesus, a vulnerable God. And that is the challenge for the church today. Let us not go back actually triumphant, no? Let's go back with humility and go back into the community, recognizing that we are part of that community, a broken world, a broken system, politically, economically, socially broken. And we now need to actually be with that community. So the church as a vulnerable community, a vulnerable society, that's something that we need to regain. And then probably we need something about our mission. What is the mission of the church? What is our mission as God's people? I'm not going to have a lecture on mission, but I know that we all have been learning about the potential for Christian message and different ways in which we can reach out to people. And maybe we need to again reaffirm the holistic nature of the mission of the church. In a community that is broken, a community that is becoming despised, we cannot just go on preaching the good news about going to heaven. We need to work for that kingdom here. And that holistic emphasis, we need to regain that mission of Christ. So maybe I will just leave it there. We need enough time for your questions and reflections now. But I'm just hoping that we can be just encouraged. In spite of all that happens around us, we are in God's business, and we are in God's church, and we are in God's mission. We might have to actually learn to do things differently. We might have to do community in a different way. We have to be a church in a different way. But God hasn't changed. And God is at work in everything that happens. The lockdown has witnessed a lot of movements too. And they all actually speak to us something. They all speak to us about something. Something that is hindering the community to be whole and together. Something that we miss as communities and as the wider society. There are bigger political, ideological questions to be asked, but I am not actually going into them now. I'm just wanting us to be just encouraged that God is right in the midst of this. And in this holy interruption, in this time of disruption, we need to learn what God is actually wanting us to see. An interruption is a time when we see the things that we wouldn't otherwise see. So may God continue to help you see the things that you wouldn't have seen before. And so together, let us emerge from this. At some point, we still do not know when we re-emerge, Let us re-emerge from this as a church committed to God's mission in our society. And maybe let us actually begin as vulnerable people. We are already very vulnerable. Our structures are not sustainable. We know that financially we are not strong. Many of our systems will collapse. But maybe that has to happen. Maybe that had to happen even without this pandemic. I sometimes think that we have idols in our structures, in our traditions, in the things we hold on to. And maybe God is inviting us to break the power of those idols in our life. Think beyond the box. Think beyond the structures and the traditions and all that we have inherited. And let us get the power of the Spirit. Let us claim that power of the Spirit to carry on the work that we are called to do. So all through the day, you've been actually thinking about leading worship, and that's what God's people are called to do. We are created to worship God. And as Christian leaders, our calling is to lead people in that worship. It's in that worship we connect with God. And it is in that worship we invite people to connect with God. And it is in that worship we bring the whole world to the presence of God. In our intercessions, in our adoration, in our confession, we bring the whole world, the very broken world around us. We bring that to God. So let us be encouraged that we have a God who understands us, and we have the means to overcome the situation. And they are deeply theological and deeply traditional, and they are deeply available, commonly available in our context and in our church. We are well equipped. But we need
Bishop John, we're enormously grateful to you, not least because this day was your initiative in the first place, so thank you for that. For those that don't know, Bishop John chairs our Reader and LLM working group and is also Warden of Readers for the Diocese. And Bishop John, if you look at your chat box, you'll see that people are starting to ask questions. And do feel free. There may be questions there that you would like to tackle yourself, and there may be those that you'd like to pass to somebody else for them to respond to.
Okay. I'll just start with the first question I can actually see there. It's about the church's resources. Whether each church in the diocese creating their own resources for how we move forward, or is the diocese making some recommendations? We are actually working together in the diocese to see what we offer for parishes and how do we re-emerge. So I can assure you that there will be some resources that will be available, and Andy can probably explain a little more, because Andy will also be involved in actually that re-emerging scenario. So definitely there is something that we are wanting to offer to the parishes, tools and things that we can provide. Andy, would you want to actually explain?
Yeah, so the Mission and Ministry Department, which includes people like Elizabeth, who's right here in this virtual room, and myself and a number of others, have been asked to produce some resources in 3 categories: some theological resources that help us to think about the present moment with God in the picture, some practical resources that talk about how to do pastoral care right now, technological things. This is, I guess, part of that set of practical resources for church leaders of different kinds. And thirdly, we've been asked to produce some study courses for churches emerging from lockdown or semi-emerging from lockdown at the moment, that can be used perhaps with a virtual home group, perhaps through Zoom or Facebook or whatever means. And all of that we're going to be working on, and our deadline for at least the first draft of all that is quite soon. We've got a 2-week away deadline, so we're going to be working really quite quickly on that. But of course, as Bishop John says, in addition to what the diocese commends to you, there will be plenty of other resources online, and maybe you are the person who will create the ideal resource for your context. So don't wait for us to do something. Do please be creating, but we'll be as helpful as we can.
And there is also a question about good examples in the diocese. Some of them are on our diocesan website, and if you have been receiving the the view, the weekly bulletin that actually comes from the diocese with Bishop Peter's write-up, and always it picks up something from the diocese. So there are a lot of good examples already there coming to you through various means, either through an email communication or through that view or the diocesan website. Probably we might be able to collect some of them together in a way later on, but at the moment you are getting them actually from different ways and in different kind of dispatches. Yeah.
I think Elizabeth has a comment.
Yes, yeah.
It strikes me that when people say the diocese, they often mean somebody else.
That's true, yeah.
There is no existence of the diocese. I think we owe a great debt of gratitude to Andy for being so good at gathering together people's ideas. But that's going to continue, and that sense of us pooling together our understanding, because I firmly believe that God reveals things to his people, the community, not to a few bright individuals, as it were. So there's something about a community of learning here, which is very exciting, I think. And I hope this continues as you carry on putting in your ideas and your suggestions.
Okay. And there is one question which is a typical archdeacon's question. No, not actually the bishop, but I might just try to respond. Some online changes will mean making changes to our buildings. How open is the church to this idea, and how easy will it be to get the appropriate faculties and approvals? Yes, if you are going to fix something onto your wall, and especially if it is a listed building, it's not just faculty, you will also need actually a permission from the English Heritage or Historic England. So that's not in our hands. But what I have noticed is that you can even do very simple things, because I just the Sunday before the lockdown, I went to a church and I did a service, just the priest and myself not being there. And I noticed that actually nothing that they did needed a faculty. They even had actually a camera fixed somewhere, but it was actually just there, and temporary kind of wiring which is not even fixed to the wall. So we can do things without really actually getting to that level. But if you are planning for a long-term kind of permanent thing, and if it needs faculty, definitely put in an application for faculty. And faculty applications don't take too long these days, actually. So you should be able to actually get a faculty done in about 45 days. But meanwhile, you can actually use it on a kind of temporary kind of a connection. You can do that. It's basically what you need is to have 1 or 2 cameras, and which is connected to a laptop or computer if you already got. And many churches have got them. And it might be easier if you already are using a kind of computer in your church setting. Otherwise you may have to but it depends on each church, what exactly you want to include in that live service. If you want to include the whole congregation from different angle, you may need actually different cameras set in different places. So that's a decision that you will have to make. So some of these things are not in our hands, and I would say that the archdeacons would be the right people if you want to consult on the particular kind of system you want to adopt and what it means. Is there anyone else raising hand?
I think Sandra had a question.
Yeah, Sandra, is that what you have written? Yeah. Think of the pollution that has been prevented by 50, 60 people meeting without using cars. Yeah. I think that is something we all need to actually keep in mind when we re-emerge from this. How do we actually work towards a sustainable world where actually we have cleaner air? Are we able to actually drive less? I would say that I have started walking a lot more now, and I would probably try to do that a lot more once we re-emerge. I am now forced a lot, so which is great, and that becomes part of my life. how can actually we use public transport, and how do we use, if you need to use car, how do we share our transport? Sometimes actually 3 of us driving from this end of the diocese to Chelmsford for a meeting. How do we actually share our cars? So instead of taking 3 cars, we take actually 1 car. There are things that we can do, and shorter distances, I always thought actually anything less than 2 miles I should walk. Everybody may not be able to do that, but if possible, if you are physically able to do that, walk or take public transport. Is there anyone else wanting to comment on that? No, I can't see anyone wanting to comment. Tim Lee is looking quite actually eagerly there. Tim, do you want to say anything?
I think we've held our PCC meetings and that with Zoom, and I see no reason why we couldn't continue doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, there are benefits. See, even for a Zoom meeting, there is a kind of carbon emission, but it is much less compared to actually, driving and, and petrol consumption and all that. But the problem is, I would say that I would use a combination of meeting in person and actually meeting online going forward, because if I am meeting the same group of people like my staff, we meet almost every 2 weeks, should we actually meet in person every 2 weeks, or no? Can I do once a month actually in person and once a month actually online? So at least try to do. You can't just actually avoid physical being together. That's important also in Christian life. So we need to be together. We are physical bodies. That's how God created us. And we have to be physically present, which is important in Christian fellowship. But I think actually there can be a combination. Why do you need to actually drive all the way to come and see me here from the other end of the diocese if it is a matter that we can actually talk like this on Zoom? So there might be situations where we would see, okay, certain cases are important, we need to meet in person. There might be situations where we can actually meet online. We may have to actually see how that works. Yes. So what ways can you suggest that will enable and encourage us to keep the momentum going and discourage us from going back to the way things were? Could there be initiatives from the diocese to the parishes so we move forward together as church? I don't think that we can go back to where we were in any case. Even if you try to do that, it's not going to happen. We can never go back to where we were, and the things are never the same. The question is, how willing are we learn from this experience? It might be possible for some of us to learn things for lockdown, and when the lockdown is over, we actually do away with that learning. We unlearn all that, and then we go back to where we were, which will be dangerous. And this is not the final virus that we are going to see. Okay, take my word for that. The world will be facing more calamities and actually lockdowns in future too. At least we have learned that we can do God's mission in lockdown too. And let us not forget that, all the learning that we have taken. So maybe we will have some reflection. What we are wanting to do is when we re-emerge, we will have archdeaconry level and deanery level kind of reflections and groups. I will be with the archdeaconry clergy and lay leaders and then we will do the same with actually deaneries too. To come together, one, we need to grieve, we have to lament, and second, we need to actually reflect on our experience. And so I'm hoping that we will learn that together, what we learned from the situation, and what we take it to the next stage. You know? And so I am not wanting to give any particular kind of advice from me at this stage. We all have been learning, and we will come together and actually put our learning together. And then I'm hoping that the result of that will be in some way put together in a document or in some way available to people, so that what we learned in one context can be passed on to another context. Elizabeth, are you wanting to add anything to that? Okay, there has been a question from Tim actually. Are you tempted to try and have cram more meetings in the day now, as there is no traveling time? That is true, Tim. Normally I would have 6 to 7 meetings a day in the normal diary, but now I have 10 or 11 a day. And I'm sitting in the same chair. Normally you have movements between meetings, but I'm sitting in the same chair and an average of 10 or 11 meetings a day. No? Some are related to the crisis now, because we need to work with the county council and NHS and police and various other agencies, no? Which are extra to the normal work. I wouldn't be doing those meetings in a normal kind of circumstances. But you're right, actually. We are able to cram more meetings in the day, and I'm doing that. Fortunately, my PA, Helen, is back. She was back last Monday after her maternity leave, and she popped in on Monday. She comes in once a week, and she found me sitting in the office between the 2 meetings, and actually she kicked me out of the office. So I'm now being monitored by somebody. So I occasionally get a kind of text or email from her, am I really out or in? So she wants me to be out at least 1 hour a day, and I'm walking at least 1 hour a day. So I'm finding that now. But it is difficult, you know. We have pressure on us to join several meetings. You know. A lot of them are national ones, and bishops have actually national meetings also. Regional bishops meet, and the national bishops meet. Then various groups meet. I'm sure that many of you have found that also true in your life. No? Tracy has asked how the lockdown has affected the finances of the church. The national projection is that we will have a shortfall of 20 to 25% of parish share this year. So that is general for the whole of Church of England. And we are also almost there, Chelmsford Diocese. So that's where we are. Probably we are looking at a shortfall of 20-25%, which means about £3 million in our budget. We already have a deficit budget. That has nothing to do with our COVID-19 crisis. So we were running a 1 million deficit finance, and you add another 3 million to that. We are looking at 4 million deficit this year. So we are looking at various ways to actually address that. We will actually release some ring-fenced money into the general fund so that we can use that. And we have also decided to cash in some of our investments, because there is no other way to actually overcome this crisis. So basically, we have taken a decision. We took a decision last week to cash in investments worth £5 million. Okay? So it is not just about overcoming that shortfall. It's also making sure that we have cash in hand, because our cash in hand was never actually up to the expectation. A big charity like us cannot actually run with 10 days money with us. No? That's what we were doing. Okay? At any point of time, we had sort of 10 days of money with us. But even Charity Commission would say that you need to have at least 1 month's money with you. Okay? And the ideal is to have 3 months cash, 3 months money somewhere available. No? So we are trying to also, one, address the deficit. Second, get to a position where we are, our cash flow is okay. And so we will be doing a few more things actually to get there. And I know that all the parishes will have the same problem. Your income has dropped, no? And that affects the diocese, and that affects actually the national church too. Yes, Marilyn has asked me, are you calling us to explore the wild, unknown, untamed side of God? Yes, definitely. There is so much unknown about God, because one of the problems with us Christians is that we think we know God, but we don't. You know? We are on a journey. We know God only in part. And we sometimes actually see the side of God we need or we like in our particular situation. You have a particular need, you are in a particular situation, in a crisis, so you see a God who addresses that particular need. God is much more than all that. And God cannot be contained in our imagination. Our imagination, human imagination, can never contain God. So there is so much of God that we don't know. And the new situations will challenge us to see God differently. And each one's experience might be even different, no? So there is no one size fits all kind of guide for knowing God. We see God differently in different situations, different personal situations, circumstances, and different communal and social situations. Yeah, so I wish you well, Marilyn. Find that God actually, you know, the wild side of God, no? Tracy had also asked a question, is there a way to give to the diocese? Yes, actually what we are thinking is, one, we don't want actually to run a parallel thing for the diocese where the parishes will be deprived, like actually rather than saying, okay, give to your parish, and we say, okay, give to the diocese also. But what we might do, we might give an opportunity for a one-time gift to the diocese. That might actually happen in July. Because it is I who raised that in the bishop's staff. Because some of us are actually financially better off. Yes, talking of myself actually, I would go off on a day off, on a Friday, I would normally go to London and meet up with a friend and have a lunch together and maybe go for a movie. I don't spend that money anymore, no? My wife travels to London, okay, and she parks her car at the station, she pays for car parking. So she spends about 400 to 500 pounds a month. And she's not commuting, she's working from home. She goes once a week only. So she raised with me the same question. So between us, we save at least 500-600 pounds a month. That's the money we would have spent anyway. So we decided we can't keep that money. It's not our money, we would have spent it anyway. So we can't keep that money. So I wanted to give that money to the diocese in addition to what I normally do. And so we are looking at actually that kind of possibility, a kind of one-off gift actually, if you can actually support the diocese, and that might happen in the month of July. Tim, would you imagine lay people leading most of the services in some parishes? The question is to you.
Okay, so that's a situation, because I'm a focal minister. I'm in a situation. This diocese hasn't really gone too much down the line of focal ministry yet, so it's something we need to do a lot of work on, learning about pathways into this ministry. It certainly got where God led me into this particular ministry. It's certainly being thought of in St David's in Wales, and the parishes of Mount Nessing, Margaretting, and Buttsbury, and I assist in Ingertson and Fryaning. And it's a little bit of a strange journey. There's two other people. There's somebody in Southend and there's somebody in East Hanningfield. There's three of us doing it at the moment. and obviously it would be a help to the diocese. It would help enormously. So, and I'm in the fortunate position of having a good pension, a bit like a stipend originally. I think of myself like the same situation, because a stipend was in Victorian times, a stipend was a sum of money paid to a clergyman so that he didn't have to take other work. And I feel I'm in that situation. Yes, got to a situation of where I'm at the church every week. I take 1 week I'll take the service, and the other week I'll preach. So tomorrow I shall be taking morning prayer, and then the following week I shall preach at Holy Communion. And it's
on again.
Okay, the connection is dropping. I think probably you did answer the question. And maybe it is some divine providence that the chat has disappeared. And that's maybe God's sign that we need to stop, no?
Yeah.
Well, what we need to do, first of all, if we may, Bishop John, is say some thank yous and issue an invitation, and then ask you to end the day with a blessing.
So who would everyone like to say thank you to? We thank you, Bishop John, for pushing Andy into doing something. We thank you because I understand that you recognise the need. We thank you, Andy, for putting everybody together. And despite, as I say, we planned today, and then we managed to cancel it. And I was thinking, oh, phew, that's fun. It's a free Saturday. Then Andy whipped us all up together into strict enthusiasm and said, this is possible. And we thank you to Isabel for leading us in our worship and contributing to our thoughts, and to Tim and to Sandra in their leading of their worships. It's been fun, and it's been a learning experience in itself during the day. And what I think is quite thrilling is it doesn't stop here, as it were. It doesn't stop now. Andy's been encouraging you to put your thoughts and your contributions up. So tell us how today is going to continue as a learning experience.
So for those people that are on Facebook, there is a Facebook group called Diocese of Chelmsford Best Practice for Small Congregations, or for small churches 2020. So just search Diocese of Chelmsford on Facebook, and I think you'll find that as one of your options. You will also have on the website for today, which is leadingworship.card.co. You'll have all the videos from today, all the PowerPoint presentations, lots of links to other resources. And Elizabeth, there's also some people called Larks. Tell us about them.
Well, should be an extraordinary. We think LARC stands for Local Advisor for Readers in Chelmsford. We've kept the name even since changing readers to licensed lay ministers, because we didn't want to have llamas instead of larks. And the larks there may well be the sort of person to get in touch with to find out such things as, have they heard that there's a desire for some training in leading worship? Have they heard that there's some good things going on? Talk to your area dean and lay chairs as well, to encourage that communication across parish boundaries as we share our resources.
Great. So Bishop John, may we invite you to end our day
maybe
with a
I
blessing.
should also thank you all, actually, Andy particularly, and Elizabeth, Tim and Sandra, and the team that put today together. Let us pray. God of love, thank you for living and loving in us and through us. May all that we do flow from our deep connection with you and all beings. Help us become a community that vulnerably shares each other's burdens and the weight of glory. Listen to our heart's longings for the healing of our world. Knowing you are hearing us better than we are speaking, we offer these prayers in all the holy names of God, through Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen. Now may the love of God surround you, the peace of God dwell in you, the presence of God watch over you, and all the saints and angels of God grant you communion and fellowship. And the blessing of God Almighty, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit be among you and remain with you always. Amen.
Amen.